Good morning, y'all. It is Friday. I'm running a few minutes behind here. Friday, the 12th of April. It's Friday, y'all. I'm off tomorrow and looking forward to the weekend. Again, Corey's doing a craft show tomorrow where she's going to have some paintings and things in it. And just be in prayer for her. She does that. I appreciate it. I'll be helping her take stuff over and get everything set up tomorrow. And then I'll be out and about doing something. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe take a drive tomorrow. Just get away. Um, Go look at some eagle's nest, maybe. Was able to find another one. If any of my friends know, I love eagles, love bald eagles. And there's something in the Bible. There's a lot about eagles in the Bible. In fact, some of the context about eagles isn't so great. And it has to deal with the end of the tribulation and the eagles. So if you want to study that, you can look at Matthew 24, and I believe it's Luke 17. And just Google, or not Google, do a Bible word search for eagles and see what it has to say about eagles in Matthew and Luke, Matthew 24 and Luke chapter 17. All right, so picking back up from where we were at yesterday, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, we're going to look at verses 7 through 9. And I'll tell you, this is not an easy passage for me to study because and do devotions on. But this is something I think churches should be teaching. The adults, I really think that this should be teaching in the adults, especially the younger adults. They need to hear this passage. Some of the older adults need to hear it too. Now, Paul says here in verse 7, for I would that all men were even as myself. Paul was single in his during his ministry time. Now, again, understanding Paul's position before he got saved, he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, and he was a part of the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin were supposed to be married. So at some point, something happened with Paul's wife, and he doesn't ever say. But at this point, he's just saying, look, it's better to be single for you. And he'll go on further about why it's better to be single, even as myself, but every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner and another after that. Paul, very godly Christian. He is our perfect example, imperfect example of how to live a Christian life. Why? You're saying, like, Paul's a great guy. He was still imperfect. Paul was still a sinner. And Paul still had struggles. He still had a thorn in the flesh. He still had temptations. He was not Jesus Christ. He was a man, but he was a man that God called to be our apostle, the apostle to the Gentiles. In fact, he wrote 13 letters, 14 if you count Hebrews, 13 letters of the New Testament. But with Paul, he was like, look, it's better to be single. But, look on here. I say, therefore, to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. He's saying, you can, and you'll see this later, he's saying that you can serve God better if you're single, because then your focus is going to be more on God and his will and what's pleasing to God. If you look further in the passage here in 1 Corinthians 7, he says that if you are trying to serve God and you're married, it's harder because your focus is not 100% on serving God. It's also taking care of your family. That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to do that. But to be married. But he's saying that you can effectively serve God more. Now, with Paul, he also gives an exception, though. Look at verse 6. But if they cannot contain, let them marry. And what is he talking about, contain? He's talking about containing those physical desires for physical intimacy, physical relations. Paul's saying, look, if they cannot contain themselves with their physical desires, then let them marry. Join one flesh in wedding. For it is better to marry than to burn. And in this context, he's not talking about burning in hell. He's talking about those burning desires for physical contact, physical relations, physical intimacy. Because let's face it, especially when you're young, those physical desires, they become very powerful, especially if a man and woman come close together. That's another example why young people should be very careful when it comes to physically touching each other before marriage, even just like rubbing arms or hugging each other, kissing. These things increase that desire for the physical intimacy. So Paul is saying in this passage, it is better to marry than to burn. And burn, he's talking about lust. Lusting for that physical, intimate relationship with a man and a woman. And I'm saying a man and a woman. And not some of these other ungodly desires that are out there. He's very, very, very clear that we need to control these physical desires, these physical emotions. And if you can't control them and you're in a relationship and you're courting somebody, you better get married so you can control them. But that also goes back over here when he was talking about defrauding a husband or wife, not defrauding, not holding back physical intimate relations in the marriage. Because if you don't do something, then those go out of control. And that is one of the leading causes of divorce. Because that desire is not being taken care of. And if it's not being taken care of, they're going to seek it other places. So, folks, 1 Corinthians 7, that first part of it, verse up to verse 9, is all about controlling those physical desires and fulfilling them in the proper place. And that is between a husband and a wife. And in that context only. I hope this is a help to you. This is not easy for me to teach. Be quite honest, as a man, these are some things every man struggles with. Maybe small amounts or big amounts. Every man has a struggle with their flesh. And so it's important for us to lay a hold of these passages. It's important, it's very important that this be taught in the churches to the adults. Corinthians is a very good picture of this Laodicean, carnal, fleshly Christian age that we're in today. That's all I have for you today. I hope you have a good weekend. God bless you all, and I'll talk to you Monday.